Whether you're a fan of the T-Rex standing tall at the end of Jurassic Park, Dino showing people how to conga in the Flintstones, or the sight of Reptar serenading his bride whilst ice skating, one thing is for certain, and that is, dinosaurs are cool. So cool in fact that with the release of Ixalan in September 2017, dinosaurs were finally granted their creature type in Magic the Gathering. They were big. They were powerful. They cost how much? Dinosaurs never really made it to the competitive side of Magic, and since their arrival have always been seen as more of a casual deck for tribal fans. However, with the addition of 2 new arrivals in Core Set 2020, a dinosaur aggro deck looks like it has the potential to do some real work in the format before rotation makes them extinct once again. So can a big creature deck stand up to the sea of planeswalkers in the format and help us make it to Mythic? Cue the dramatic intro. We want to hit hard and hit fast with big creatures, and for style points, we want those creatures to be dinosaurs. Marauding Raptor not only discounts our creatures for added value, it enables any enraged triggers without the need for our dinosaurs to enter combat. Shifting Ceratops is a 4-drop that can't be countered and has protection from blue. This helps us deal with all those pesky Teferi decks that have taken over the meta. Charging Monstrosaur was a personal favourite card when it was released, and it has a massive impact if you can cheat it out early. Our final dinosaur is Ripjaw Raptor. Not only does the enrage ability keep our hand full, but the power and toughness line up well against low to the ground aggro decks. We also play a full playset of Gruul Spellbreaker, as the flexibility it has thanks to the Riot ability can allow us to take different lines of play when required. Llanowar Elves and Shock are included as our optimal turn 1 plays, and a full playset of Thorn Lieutenant keeps us alive against any deck with a lot of spot removal. Our removal comes in the form of Domri's Ambush, enabling all our big dinosaurs to punch other creatures off the board. And Domri himself, who not only allows us to fight other creatures, but can ramp us into our bigger threats. A full sideboard is provided in the deck list that can be found in the description box down below, but now let's get to the gameplay. We keep a 7 with a Llanowar Elf and a Shock for some early interaction. Opponent plays a mountain and after completing the important task of choosing the right colour for their cat, kindly passes the turn. We lead with a Llanowar Elf that is either going to prevent a burn spell hitting our face or ramp us into the Spellbreaker next turn. Opponent casts a Rixmadi Reveler discarding a swamp, suggesting they could possibly be mana flooded in their opening hand. We cast the Spellbreaker and give it a +1/+1 counter to keep it out of range of Lightning Strike. Legion Warboss from our opponent and the Goblin token gets eaten by our Spellbreaker. We shock in a Stomping Grounds and cast Domri's Ambush to give our Spellbreaker an additional counter before he punches the Warboss in the face. We shock the Reveler out of the way to give us a clear shot at our opponent. A second Warboss from our opponent and we choose not to block so we can cast the Monstrosaur next turn. We cast the Monstrosaur and hit our opponent for 10 damage when they choose not to block any of our creatures. Our opponent casts Judith to increase the power of their team and they attack with everything. This leaves them dead on our next attack as we can guarantee 5 damage through. With this in mind, we choose not to block as we can afford the life loss and our opponent has clearly not done the maths. We attack with the Spellbreaker and the Monstrosaur on our next turn for the win. We keep a 7 with access to both colours and a Marauding Raptor. We are on the draw, so if we can get him to stick and draw another land, we can have a Ripjaw Raptor on turn 3. Opponent scries a card to the top with their temple to begin. We draw a Llanowar and cast it to give us some additional ramp, but it dies to a shock from our opponent on their turn. They also play a Hinterland Harbour, suggesting they are playing the Elementals deck. We draw a Monstrosaur, pay 2 life for the Stomping Grounds and cast the Marauding Raptor. We need his creature discount to not fall too far behind, so fingers crossed he lives a turn. Leapkin Druid from our opponent confirms it is the Elementals. It also gives us a target for Domri's Ambush if we do not draw a third land. As luck would have it, we do draw the land we need and cast the Ripjaw Raptor ahead of curve. The damage on entry from his Raptor brethren triggers the Enrage ability and we draw a land, meaning we can cast our Monstrosaur next turn. We attack with the Red Raptor and deal 4 damage to our opponent after they choose not to block. Our opponent casts Omnath and chooses to deal 2 damage directly to us. We change course as we want to deal with the Omnath before he gets out of hand. We cast Domri so we can have a fight option later in the game. We tick up for mana and cast Domri's Ambush, giving our Green Raptor an additional counter before he punches Omnath. We attack for 9 points of damage and take our opponent to 7. A second Omnath from our opponent sees a further 2 damage to our face. They play a land, choosing to give Omnath a counter. With our hasty dinosaur in hand and Domri ready to fight, we are feeling confident our big toothed beauties can win the game this turn. However, after drawing our card for turn, our opponent concedes in awe. We keep a ramp heavy 7 with 3 lands to ensure we can hardcast the Spellbreaker should our Llanowar elves get killed early on. We start with an elf, and our opponent responds with a tapped Blood Crypt. We draw a red raptor, but continue with the initial Spellbreaker plan, giving it haste so we can deal some early damage. On their turn, our opponent casts Dreadhorde Butcher, attacking us for 1 and triggering its ability to grow, making it a 2/2 after combat. We play the red raptor for turn and look to increase our ramp by casting a second Llanowar elves. Unfortunately, we completely forgot about the damage trigger from the red raptor, who instantly kills our little elf as it enters the battlefield.
Well, that was fucking dreadful.
Previous experience tells us these butchers get out of hand quickly and we don't want to be holding back blockers, so we shock the butcher and our opponent directs the damage on death to our other Llanowar, removing the only piece of ramp we have left. We attack for 3 again and take our opponent to 14. Legion Warboss from our opponent, and our red raptor eats up the goblin token made at the start of combat. As the token generation from the Warboss isn't optional, and knowing we have enraged dinos in our deck, hopefully we can use these tokens to our advantage later in the game. However, having top deck to shock and having no enraged creatures on the battlefield, we decide it's best to remove the goblin and have a free swing at our opponent for another 5 damage. Midnight Reaper from our opponent, whose 3 power lines up well against our current creatures, but victory is ours as we draw the 4th land we need to cast our Monstrosaur. Thanks to the Monstrosaur having haste, we can attack with all of our creatures this turn, and regardless of how our opponent blocks, we will win the game. If they choose to block our biggest creature, the trample damage exceeds their life total. If they choose to block our red raptor, they will only take 8 damage, but since the Midnight Reaper will die in combat, the additional point of damage from the Reaper's triggered ability will finish them off. We attack with everything, they block the red raptor, and when the Midnight Reaper dies, it deals the killing blow. We keep a 7 with Llanowar elves and shocks for early interaction before we play our new Ceratops, who have yet to have the pleasure of casting. Opponent leaves with a mountain and we play our Llanowar elf after drawing a Domri for turn. Surprisingly, our Llanowar survives as there is no end of turn shock from our opponent. On their turn, they cast a Steamkin, which definitely will be hit with a shock on our next go. We shock the Steamkin and attack for 1 as we have no 2-drops to cast. Chainwhirler from our opponent puts an end to the fairy tale story of our 1/1 elf taking the game single-handedly, and we draw the 4th land we need for the Ceratops. We decide to not cast Domri as he is vulnerable to the Chainwhirler and his fight ability will be useful once our Ceratops is on board. We take 3 damage from the Chainwhirler's attack, taking us to 16. We draw a Spellbreaker for turn and cast the Ceratops to give us a big presence on the board. Our opponent attacks with the Chainwhirler, and we must decide whether to block and hope they were bluffing, or risk losing our creature on first strike damage following a burn spell. We chance it and block the Chainwhirler with the Ceratops, who takes a shock to the face before damage. Whilst losing our Ceratops is not ideal, we have prevented 5 points of damage and have other creature options in hand. We draw another Llanowar and cast a Spellbreaker, giving it a +1/+1 counter. We follow up with the Llanowar as we need the ramp for the Monstrosaur in hand and figure the Spellbreaker will be the bigger distraction. Our opponent attacks with the Chainwhirler, and once again we block, as if they want to use up burn spells removing our creatures and not hitting our face, then that is fine with us. Opponent plays the same trick as before and shocks the Spellbreaker before damage, so he dies to the first strike. We cast the Monstrosaur and attack, as the 5 points of damage could be valuable late game. Our opponent retaliates with the Chainwhirler, enabling them to cast Light Up the stage for its spectacle cost. 2 mountains are revealed and our opponent passes, suggesting they have no further creatures in hand. We cast Domri's Ambush and our Monstrosaur gobbles up the goblin. There's a cheeky flavour win when we follow up with Domri himself to further increase the Monstrosaur's power to 7. They Wizard's Lightning our Domri, who survives on 1, and we attack to take their life total to 7. After drawing their card for turn, our opponent concedes, fearing the wrath of our mighty Monstrosaur. We mulligan our first hand as it is too top heavy into a 6 with no red sources. Down to 5, we see the same with a full set of forests, leaving us no choice but to chance it on a mulligan to 4. This is however a bit more palatable thanks to the new London Mulligan rule. This shows us a perfect opening hand, but now we have to put 3 cards back. We bottom both elves and a forest, figuring the creature discount from the red raptor will fare us better as we try and draw back into the game. We both play tapped lands to start before we cast the first spell of the game with the red raptor. In response, they flash in the Brineborn Cutthroat, suggesting we are up against some sort of Sultai flash deck. Our opponent leaves up 2 mana and passes a turn to us. Thankfully, we draw the 3rd land we need to cast the Ripjaw in the hopes of drawing more cards. However, a Lookout's Dispersal takes care of that plan. This also puts a counter on the Cutthroat, meaning it will now trade with our Red Raptor in combat. They pass once again, leaving up 2 mana. We draw a Ceratops and cast it, as the protection from blue will help us start to get damage in on our opponent. We don't attack, and our opponent casts Growth Spiral on our end step, further growing the Cutthroat. They pass once again, holding up mana. On our upkeep, they Tyrant Scorn, destroying our Red Raptor, further pumping the Cutthroat. We draw a Domri's Ambush for turn, which allows our Ceratops to punch the Cutthroat. We attack for 6 and take our opponent to 14. Our opponent shocks in an Overgrown Tomb and passes, which means we can expect a 4 mana shenanigan on our turn. We draw a second Ambush and attack for another 6 damage with the Ceratops. We tempt out a counterspell with the Spellbreaker, which resolves, so we put a +1/+1 counter on it. On our end step, our opponent casts Vraska's Contempt on our Ceratops. We draw a Ripjaw and attack for 4 with the Spellbreaker. We cast the Ripjaw, which resolves, and feel confident that we can close out this game despite our mulligan to 4. On our end step, our opponent casts the Nightpack Ambusher. They move directly to end step to create a token, meaning they can block our creatures and survive. We are now in a position to remove the Ambusher using the Domri's Ambush we have in hand, and barring any interference from our opponent, swing for lethal next turn. We draw a Thorn Lieutenant for turn, we remove the Ambusher with a punch from our Ripjaw. But as we are about to move to attacks, this happens. No! Yes, in what should have been a major confidence boosting victory after a mulligan to 4, turns out to be a sea of disappointment when the client disconnects and takes us back to the main menu. Following the kick in the dick that was the last game, we decided to play one more, as it would be nice to try and go 5-0 in a single run. We keep a 7 that allows us to cast a turn 3 Ripjaw, providing our elf sticks around. Our opponent starts the game with a Leyline of Anticipation. What is this? Commander? This means that we will have to navigate the flash traps once again. We start with a Llanowar and pass. The one saving grace of the Leyline is that it suggests we are not playing mono red. Temple Garden and a main phase Llanowar elves from our opponent suggests it could be the Bant Rap deck that looks to play Nissa and Mass Manipulation. We cast a Spellbreaker and give it haste, as we want to try and win quickly against this deck. Our opponent chooses not to block and goes to 15. 2 more main phase Llanowar elves from our opponent on their turn gives them at least 5 mana to play with next turn. We draw the Red Raptor and cast it, followed by a Thorn Lieutenant. We attack with the Spellbreaker, as they are unlikely to block and go down to 12. On their turn they cast Shalai. Main phase. Giving all their other creatures hexproof. We draw a land for turn and cast the Monstrosaur. This triggers the Red Raptor to increase its power by 2, so we attack with both dinosaurs, as they will at least trade with Shalai if our opponent blocks. Our opponent trades with the Red Raptor and takes 5 damage, taking their life total to 7. However, on their turn, our opponent concedes. Main phase. In conclusion, this deck is very powerful and has picked up some well needed new toys in the form of the new core set Dinosaurs. It is, however, vulnerable to board wipes and flyers, as we found out in later games after recording, where we lost a lot to mono blue and Esper control. Those games rely on you getting your Ceratops on the battlefield as quickly as possible and having a spare green mana to give it reach, in particular against mono blue. Whilst the deck is expensive and will take a lot of rare wildcards to put together, it is worth it if you are looking to jam a lot of games in a short amount of time, but don't want to play something like mono red burn or the white weenie decks. Let us know what you think of the deck in the comments below. Is there anything you would change? We have a full deck list including sideboard in the description that can be imported directly into Arena, so be sure to let us know how you get on if you do try it out. If you would like to keep up to date with our progress on the Arena rank ladder, or if you just want to laugh at all the silly memes we post, you can follow us on Facebook and Twitter at Making Mythic. And finally, don't forget to subscribe to the channel to be notified of all our future releases. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.